The message arrived at 9:32 in the evening, 3 days before my sister's wedding. No greeting, no explanation, just one sentence from my mother. "It's best if you don't come, Rachel. Things will be easier that way." The words didn't shout, but they still screamed. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, half expecting a second text, a correction, a reason, something to prove I'd misread. None came. The faint hum of the Miami skyline outside my window blurred into silence. My throat tightened as if the message had weight. Not invited, not wanted. After 33 years of holding this family together, I had finally been edited out by my own mother. I set the phone down on the dresser, its light still bleeding across the wall, and tried to breathe. My mind began to fill in every possible justification. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she meant I didn't have to come if I was busy. But no, those words were clean, precise. I scrolled up through the thread old photos, planning notes, receipts I'd paid. There was no fight, no fallout, nothing that would have earned exile. I had designed the entire invitation suite. I'd chosen the florist when Claire couldn't decide between hydrangeas or peonies. And now, 3 days before the ceremony, I was told not to show up. The air conditioning hummed low, the only sound in the apartment. Somewhere beyond the balcony, waves rolled against the shore, calm and endless. I picked the phone back up and pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. The line clicked once, twice, then her voice came through, smooth, controlled, the kind of voice that always made me feel like the difficult one. "Rachel, honey, I was going to call you tomorrow," my mother said. "I didn't want you to take it the wrong way." "The wrong way?" My voice cracked. "You just told me not to come to my own sister's wedding." She sighed softly, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Claire's been under a lot of pressure. She's anxious. You know how she gets. Having you there might heighten things." "Heighten things," I repeated. "You mean remind her who actually planned this wedding, Rachel," she said sharply, the edge slipping through her perfect tone. "This isn't about you. It's Claire's day. You've always been the strong one. You can understand." There it was, the phrase she'd used my entire life to silence me. "You're the strong one." Translation: you don't get to break to ask to want. My hand trembled as I held the phone, but my voice came out steady. "You've been saying that since I was 10, Mom. Maybe I'm just tired of understanding." Silence. "Then I think we should talk when you're calmer." She hung up before I could respond. For a long moment I stood there staring at the black screen, feeling my heartbeat echo through the empty apartment. The reflection in the window looked foreign. My hair pulled back from hours of work, dark circles under my eyes, from too many late nights running a design agency that had barely made it through its first profitable quarter. I'd spent the last few years building something from nothing, while Claire curated a life out of filters and hashtags. And still, somehow, she was the one being protected. Rach, Daniel's voice came softly from the kitchen. "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. I turned, and he was there holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea, barefoot, eyes steady as the ocean. He took one look at my face and set the mugs down without asking. "What happened?" I swallowed hard. "My mother says I shouldn't come to the wedding. That it'll be easier for everyone." He frowned. "What? That doesn't even make sense. You've been helping with everything." I nodded, my throat tight. "Apparently, I make Claire anxious. I'm the strong one, remember?" He stepped closer, his presence grounding me. "Do you want to talk about it, or do you want to leave it behind?" I blinked at him. The question was so simple, but it split something open inside me. "Leave it behind," I said finally. He nodded once, as if he'd been waiting for that answer. "Then maybe it's time we get out of here for a while. The new yacht charter's ready. I was supposed to take it out for a test run next week. 7 stars, full crew, quiet route through the Caribbean. Come with me." I almost laughed. "You're serious?" "Completely." He leaned against the counter. "You've spent years fixing their messes. Maybe this time you let the ocean fix you." His words lingered. For a second, I pictured it, the sun, the sea, the endless distance between me and every expectation that had ever smothered me. Then I saw my phone screen again, Mom's text glowing cold and final. It's best if you don't come. Maybe she was right. Maybe it really would be best. I picked up one of the mugs and took a sip. The tea had gone lukewarm, but it still soothed something small inside me. Okay, I whispered. Let's go. Daniel smiled, a slow curve that made the room feel less heavy. Good. We leave in 2 days. I'll handle the bookings. Just bring what you need. He walked to the living room to call the harbor manager. I stood in the doorway watching him, feeling the rhythm of his calm against the chaos in my chest. Somewhere inside me, a quiet voice said, this was what peace felt like before it began. When the call ended, he looked over his shoulder. You sure you're ready to disconnect for a while? No emails, no texts, no family drama. I hesitated, then powered off my phone. I'm ready. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the low hum of the city, my mind flipping through memories like a slideshow I hadn't asked to watch. The time Claire crashed my car and Mom said it was my fault for leaving the keys out. The Christmas I worked double shifts to buy gifts for everyone, only to find mine missing from under the tree. The countless moments I'd been told to understand. It hit me then that this wasn't new. This text was just the latest chapter in a story that had always been written by someone else. I got up before sunrise, pulled on a hoodie, and stepped out onto the balcony. The air was thick with salt and humidity. Down below, the ocean shimmered pale blue under the first light, calm and detached. I closed my eyes and breathed it in, promising myself that when I left, I'd leave it all: the guilt, the responsibility, the constant need to prove I was good enough. Daniel joined me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. Couldn't sleep either. Not really. He kissed the top of my head. Then, let's make it worth staying awake for. We'll start packing after breakfast. I nodded, staring at the horizon. For the first time in years, the idea of leaving didn't feel like running away. It felt like stepping towards something lighter, something that might finally belong to me. Inside, the phone buzzed once more on the counter. I glanced at it, saw Mom's name, and turned it face down. I didn't need to read whatever came next. The conversation had already ended. I packed my suitcase in silence later that morning. Simple things: sundresses, notebooks, a camera I hadn't touched in months. As I folded each piece of clothing, I felt lighter, as though I was shedding more than fabric. When I zipped the bag shut, it sounded like closure. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly over the water. The weather forecast said it would pass by morning, but I knew better. Storms like this weren't just weather, they were omens. I stood by the window, watching the clouds roll in, and whispered to no one, "It's best if I don't come." The words didn't hurt anymore. They just sounded true. When Daniel came to stand beside me, I met his eyes and managed a small smile. "Next time Mom calls, I won't answer." He nodded. "Good. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace." As lightning flickered far out at sea, I turned away from the window. My phone lay dark and silent on the dresser. I left it that way. The storm could come if it wanted. I was already gone. The morning light cut through the blinds like thin gold ribbons. I woke before the alarm, the way I always did when something heavy waited on the other side of the day. The suitcase stood by the door, zipped and ready, like it couldn't wait to leave either. From the kitchen came the soft clink of porcelain. Daniel was already awake, reviewing yacht papers at the table, his calm movements filling the space I'd spent the night pacing in. I poured water into the kettle and watched the steam rise. The quiet felt different now, not comforting, not empty, just temporary. The air held that stillness that comes before a big decision is set in motion. My phone lay face down on the counter, the black screen a small reminder of last night's message. "It's best if you don't come." When the kettle whistled, I turned it off but didn't pour. Instead, I unlocked my phone. The notification banner from my mother was still pinned at the top. I opened the calendar app, found the reminder, Claire's wedding, Saturday 4 p.m., and held my finger on it until the delete option appeared. A simple tap, a soft vibration, and the date disappeared. "Final?" Daniel asked from behind me. "Final," I said. We loaded the car in silence. The morning outside was too bright for the mood inside me. A few palm trees leaned toward the ocean like they wanted to follow us. The city was still waking up, traffic thin, the air salted and damp. We didn't talk much on the drive to the marina. I just stared out the window, letting the skyline fade. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at her name for a long time before answering. Hello? Oh, honey, good. You picked up. Her tone was soft, too soft. It carried that polished edge she used when she needed something. Listen, I talked to Claire again. She's nervous. Maybe we were hasty about the guest list. I felt my stomach tighten. Hasty, yes, sweetheart. Weddings are complicated. There's so much pressure. You know how your sister is. Emotional, sensitive. It just seemed easier to cut me out. Don't start that tone, Rachel, she said quickly. You're not being punished. You're keeping the peace. You've always been the strong one. That's why we rely on you to understand. There it was again, the sentence that had followed me my entire life. You're the strong one. I swallowed. You're not asking for understanding, Mom. You're asking for silence. A sharp pause crackled through the line. I think you should call when you've calmed down. I think I just did. I hung up before she could. Daniel glanced over from the driver's seat. That was her yes. She's trying to rewrite the story. I nodded, exhaling slowly. And for once, I'm not reading along. The rest of the drive passed under an empty sky. When the highway curved toward the harbor, a rush of sea air filled the car, cool and wild, smelling of salt and diesel. I rolled down the window and let the wind slap against my face. Somewhere behind us, a family line was fraying, and I didn't feel the urge to mend it. The marina appeared like a dream, rows of white yachts glinting under the sun, flags fluttering lazily, water lapping at the docks. Daniel parked near a sleek vessel trimmed in silver. Its name, the Celestine, shimmered across the side in polished chrome. She's beautiful, I said, stepping out. She's freedom, he corrected with a smile. A small crew waited near the gangway, Captain Marco, a sun-tanned man with gentle eyes, Ava the steward with hair pinned perfectly in a braid, and Luis the young chef who smelled faintly of lime and sugar. Their warm greetings felt effortless, unfiltered. For once I didn't have to earn anyone's kindness. Marco extended a hand to me. Welcome aboard, Miss Monroe. The deck felt solid beneath my feet. Yet I swayed slightly as if my body hadn't caught up to the idea of leaving. Behind me, Miami's skyline shimmered a silver mirage against blue. I watched it for a few seconds longer before turning away. The city that never saw me, I whispered. Daniel looked over. What did you say? Nothing. Let's go. As the engines hummed to life, I stood by the railing, hair whipping across my face. The shoreline receded, first buildings, then cranes, then a smear of white against the horizon. With every mile, the air grew cleaner, the sound softer. A strange relief crawled through me, like my lungs were remembering how to breathe. By midday, the coast was gone completely. The yacht carved through turquoise water, dolphins leaping in its wake. Luis brought out fresh juice and sandwiches, and the crew moved quietly around us, giving space without making absence feel awkward. Daniel joined me on the upper deck, 2 glasses of sparkling water in hand. Still thinking about them, I didn't answer immediately. I watched a gull dip and vanish into the sea foam. I keep expecting someone to call me back, I said finally. Tell me it was a mistake, that they didn't mean it. And if they did, I looked at him, sunlight burning gold across his shoulders. Then I'd let it ring. He smiled. That's my girl. We sat there in silence, watching the horizon breathe. For the first time, my heart wasn't racing toward a problem. It was just steady. The afternoon passed in a haze of sunlight and sea spray. The crew served dinner beneath soft string lights, fresh fish, lemon butter, something that tasted faintly of thyme. I found myself laughing when Luis dropped a spoon and cursed in Spanish. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed without guilt. After dinner, Daniel poured wine into crystal glasses and set them on the table. To new habits, he said. Like what? Not answering calls that don't deserve you. I clinked my glass against his. To that. The sky turned violet, clouds stretched thin like silk. Somewhere the wind shifted. Marco stepped out from the cabin and looked west. Storm building, he said. Nothing serious, but we'll get a few hours of rain. I walked to the railing. On the horizon, dark clouds stacked like mountains. Lightning flickered deep within them, too far to hear but close enough to see. It's beautiful, I said. Daniel joined me. Storms look harmless when you're not under them. I thought of my family, how they fed on tension, how peace always looked suspicious to them. I wondered if they'd even notice I was gone. Probably not. Not until something fell apart. Rain began to fall lightly, cool and clean. I didn't move. The drops speckled my skin, tiny reminders that nature had better ways to wash away what didn't belong. You okay? Daniel asked softly. Yeah, I said. I think I am. He brushed wet hair from my face. We can go inside. Not yet. I watched the storm roll, closer, the sky pulsing silver behind the dark. My phone sat on the table behind us, silent, face down. I didn't need to check it. Whatever waited there could wait forever. The thunder cracked, once distant but firm, and the rain came harder. Daniel took my hand. Come on. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and linen. He handed me a towel and poured more wine. The thunder grew louder, closer, then began to drift again as the storm passed north. We sat by the window watching streaks of lightning fade over the horizon. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, barefoot hair, tangled face, clean of expectation. I didn't look like the daughter who fixed everything. I looked like someone starting over. When I finally stood to go to bed, Daniel reached for my hand again. You did it, he said quietly. Did what left without apologizing. I smiled, small but sure. Feels strange. Strange is good, he said. I nodded. Then strange it is. As I crawled into bed, the yacht swayed, gently rocking me the way childhood never had. Outside, the waves whispered against the hull, each one softer than the last. I closed my eyes, letting the rhythm pull me somewhere far from guilt, far from the words that had chased me all my life. The storm moved farther out to sea, and I whispered to the dark, let them look. I'm already gone. The hum of the engines lulled me into sleep. The last thing I saw before drifting off was Daniel's hand reaching over to turn off the bedside lamp, his shadow stretching across the wall like a quiet promise that the next time the world called I wouldn't answer. The sound of the ocean woke me before the alarm. A low, rhythmic whisper, soft against the hull like the world was breathing slower out here. The cabin light was pale and golden, filtered through the curtains. I pulled the sheets away and stood barefoot on the wooden floor, still warm from yesterday's Sunday. When I stepped out onto the deck, the air wrapped around me like silk. The sea stretched endless and blue, calm as glass. The horizon shimmered pink at the edges, and the only sound was water gently splitting against the yacht's bow. I leaned against the railing and inhaled the scent of salt and wind. For the first time in days, my heart wasn't clenched. The stillness didn't feel empty, it felt earned. Daniel appeared a few minutes later, barefoot, hair messy, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Morning, he said, handing me one. The steam curled into the air between us. Morning, I whispered back. We stood side by side, watching the sun rise in silence. The light spilled across the water, turning it molten gold. I thought about how every morning used to start with noise, emails, phone calls, deadlines, family texts. Here, there was none of that. Just space. I took a sip of coffee and said, "It's strange how quiet can feel so full." Daniel smiled softly. "Maybe it's because no one's asking you to fill it." I let out a slow breath. Maybe. When he went back below deck, I stayed where I was. The ocean seemed endless, patient and forgiving. A few dolphins leapt near the wake, their smooth bodies catching the light before disappearing again. Watching them felt like therapy, effortless and wordless. The peace was so deep it hurt a little, because I knew it couldn't last forever. My mind drifted uninvited back to the past, to the constant chaos that used to define every morning. Claire crying in the kitchen over another failed relationship. Mom pacing, whispering to relatives about what we'll tell people. Me already running late to work, cleaning up everyone else's mess before I even had a chance to face my own. I'd carried that same weight through every chapter of my life. Responsibility disguised as love. I closed my eyes and remembered being 12, standing in our old backyard while Dad taught me to skip stones. Claire had been inside throwing a tantrum over a lost bracelet. Mom's voice echoed through the screen door, "Rachel, handle it." I'd dropped the stone and gone back inside. Even now, the memory made my jaw tighten. It was small things like that, hundreds of them, that had built a lifetime of silent compromises. I'd always been the one who understood. The one who cleaned the emotional spill before anyone slipped on it. The sea rolled softly beneath me, like it was nodding along. Daniel's voice came through the wind. "You look like you're somewhere else." I turned. He stood at the doorway, a shadow framed by sunlight. "Just visiting old ghosts," I said. He walked closer, rested his hand on the railing beside mine. "They don't pay rent. Don't let them stay too long." I smiled. "You always know what to say." "Only because I've had practice leaving my own behind," he said. "You'd be surprised how quiet the world becomes once you stop trying to fix people who like the sound of their own chaos." I let the words sink in. They stung, but not in a bad way. More like truth rubbing against old scar tissue. After breakfast, I sat in the small lounge with my notebook. The pages were still mostly empty, but that morning I wanted to write something, anything. I wrote the date at the top of the page and stared at it for a while. Then slowly the pen began to move. Strong, responsible, reliable. Words I'd been called all my life. Words that had shaped me into something functional but fragile. I stared at them until the ink blurred a little from my thumb. Then I crossed them out one by one and replaced them. Free. Visible. Aloud. Enough. For a long moment, I just stared at that last word. Enough. It looked strange in my handwriting, as if it belonged to someone else. I closed the notebook and pressed my palm over the cover, feeling the faint imprint of the words beneath. They felt truer than anything anyone had ever said to me. Later that afternoon, I decided to swim. The water was impossible to resist, clear as glass, warm from the Sunday. I stood at the back deck, hesitated for a second, then dove in. The sea closed over me, cool and silent. Below the surface, the world changed color. Everything was green and blue and slow. I opened my eyes underwater and watched sunlight scatter like glitter. Tiny fish flickered past, unconcerned by my intrusion. For the first time, I understood what stillness could feel like inside the body, not just around it. I floated on my back, letting the current carry me. The sky above was a perfect, endless blue, and in that floating moment, I realized something small but powerful. No one could reach me here. No phone, no guilt, no performance. Just me. And the sea unedited. When I climbed back aboard dripping and breathless, Daniel handed me a towel. "Feel better." "Like I finally washed something off," I said, laughing softly. He smiled. "Looks good on you." We spent the afternoon stretched out on the deck chairs, reading and napping in turns. The air smelled like salt and coconut oil. Luis brought us slices of pineapple and a cold drink he called the Island Ember. I took a sip, sweet, tangy, with a hint of something fiery underneath. I liked that balance, calm but not dull. Later, as the sun started to sink, I felt my phone buzz in the cabin below. I didn't move. I just listened to the faint hum, watched the horizon burn orange. I could almost imagine who it was, Mom maybe, or some relative wanting to check in. But the sound didn't pull me the way it used to. It just came and went, like another passing wave. When the buzzing stopped, Daniel looked at me. "Not going to check it, no," I said. "If it's important, they'll find another way. If it's not, I've already heard enough." He nodded approvingly. "That's my favorite version of you." "Which one?" "The one that doesn't explain herself." I smiled. "I'm still learning her." As twilight deepened, the yacht slowed to an easy drift. The sea around us turned lavender and gold. I could smell dinner cooking below deck, garlic butter, something with herbs. A small wind lifted my hair, and I closed my eyes, letting it brush away the last traces of restlessness. For a while I just listened to the ocean, to the slow hum of the engine, to my own breathing. Later, when Daniel came to sit beside me, he didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, shared. I rested my head on his shoulder, watching the first stars blink awake above us. "Do you think peace can last?" I asked quietly. He thought for a moment. "Maybe not forever, but long enough to teach you what you deserve." I nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Then I'll take it while it's here." We stayed like that until the sea turned dark and the world felt smaller in the best way. When I finally went below deck, my phone's screen glowed faintly in the corner, another notification lighting it up. I paused, staring at the small rectangle of light. Then I turned it face down again, the way I had the night before. The sky above the porthole was deep blue, scattered with stars. I whispered into the dark, "Whatever waits there can wait forever." The yacht rocked gently beneath me, and the ocean whispered back as if agreeing. I closed my eyes, the rhythm steady, unhurried. And for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of what I left behind. The morning began like any other, but something in the air felt different. The light was softer, quieter, as if even the sun was holding its breath. I woke before Daniel, listening to the rhythmic slap of water against the hull. For a moment, I didn't know what day it was. Then the thought hit me like a slow echo: Saturday, the wedding day. I lay still for a few seconds, eyes on the ceiling. Somewhere in Florida, flowers were being arranged, cameras adjusted, champagne poured into crystal flutes. Claire's big day. I wondered if she had slept at all last night, or if she had paced the same way I did before my father's funeral, heart-racing, smile rehearsed. I sat up, the sheets cool against my legs. When I stepped onto the deck, the world was gold and endless. The sun was just high enough to shimmer over the water, scattering diamonds across the surface. Daniel was already there, a book open on his lap, hair tousled by the wind. He looked up and smiled. "Happy Saturday," he said in that voice that could make anything sound peaceful. I managed a smile back. "You remembered." He poured me coffee from the silver pot and handed it over. The smell was strong, comforting. "To doing absolutely nothing," he said. "To the same," I replied, though my chest was tight. We sat in silence, sipping. The sea around us stretched unbroken, a shade between turquoise and dream. But even in all that beauty, my mind wandered home. I pictured the bridesmaids laughing as they took photos, the band tuning up, my mother walking around in her favorite pastel jacket giving orders. I could almost hear her voice smile, "Claire, this is your perfect day." A horn blared in the distance. I turned and saw a massive cruise ship passing far off its decks, glittering with tiny figures, waving at nothing. The sound carried across the waves, deep and hollow like applause. I shivered. Daniel's hand brushed mine. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said softly. "Just thinking." He studied me for a moment. "You don't have to feel bad for leaving, you know." "I know." "Do you?" I looked at the horizon. Part of me still feels like I broke something, like they're all there pretending not to notice the empty seat. Daniel leaned back, eyes steady. "That seat was empty long before you decided not to sit in it." I didn't answer. The words sank deep, heavier than the coffee in my stomach. By mid-morning, the yacht glided toward open water, past a chain of small green islands that looked untouched by time. The air shimmered with heat. Marco, the captain, adjusted the sails and called something to the crew in Spanish. I closed my eyes, letting the wind tangle through my hair. "Somewhere right now they're saying their vows," I murmured. Daniel looked up from his book. "And somewhere else the universe is listening." The way he said it made me laugh softly without meaning to. "You think the universe keeps score, I think it balances," he said, eventually. He wasn't wrong. Around noon, Luis brought us lunch on a tray: grilled fish, mango salad, a glass of chilled rosé. We ate under the awning, the taste of salt and citrus mingling in the air. For a while it felt like any other day. Then I heard Ava the steward chatting with Luis near the bar. "You see the wedding on live stream?" she asked. "Everyone's talking about it. Some influencer from Palm Beach. Looks like a movie." Luis laughed. "Yeah, my girlfriend's watching it. Said it's trending already." I froze mid-bite. A wedding in Palm Beach. Influencer. Trending. My pulse stuttered. There were hundreds of weddings in Florida that weekend, but something about her tone made my chest tighten. "Which one?" I asked before I could stop myself. Luis turned. "Oh, you've probably seen her online. Claire Monroe. Big social presence. Her family's famous for something. It's like a royal event." The fork slipped from my hand. Luis didn't notice. "Anyway, they're live streaming the ceremony on a wedding blog. My girlfriend's obsessed. Says the bride looks nervous." I forced a small laugh. "I can imagine." Daniel's eyes flicked to mine, reading everything I didn't say. "Wild coincidence," he said gently. "Yeah," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Wild." When they went back inside, I exhaled slowly, pressing my palms flat on the table. "You okay?" Daniel asked. "I think so. Just surprised." "Rachel," his tone made me look up. "You don't have to follow the story. You don't even have to know it." I nodded. "I know, but part of me still wants to see it. Just once. To know how they talk about me when I'm not in the room." He leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Then, ask yourself this: would knowing make it hurt less or more?" I looked away. "Maybe both." "Then maybe neither," he said. The sea was still deceptively calm. My reflection shimmered on the surface, broken only when a wave lapped against the hull. For a second I thought about reaching for my phone just to peek, but I didn't move. I told myself that peace wasn't something to look for, it was something to protect. By late afternoon, the sunlight had turned honey-colored. We passed a small island, nothing but palms and a stretch of white sand. Marco called it Cayo Blanco, the island that listens. I stood at the railing, watching birds circle above the waves. Daniel came up behind me. "It's beautiful," he said. "It is." He handed me a drink, cold, sweet, with a slice of lime. "To not being there," he said. I hesitated, then raised my glass. "To finally leaving." Our glasses touched, a soft clink swallowed by the wind. For a while everything felt suspended, like the day itself didn't want to end. But even in stillness, there's always something brewing underneath. I could feel it. At sunset, the sky exploded in color: rose and gold bleeding into violet. The sea mirrored it perfectly until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Luis set the dinner table under soft lights. The smell of roasted garlic drifted through the air. Daniel poured wine and raised his glass again. "To doing nothing with intention," he said with that half-smile I'd learned to love. I laughed. "To doing nothing at all." As the glasses met, a vibration rattled across the table. My phone face down near the candle. I frowned. The glow from the screen reflected faintly off the silver cutlery. Daniel noticed. "Ignore it." I tried. I took another sip of wine, forced my eyes to the horizon. But the light blinked again. He sighed, reached over, and flipped it so the glow disappeared. "They've had enough of your time." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Curiosity itched like salt water against a healing wound. When he went to speak to Marco about the route, I couldn't resist. I reached for the phone, thumb hovering over the lock screen. One notification preview glowed faintly. "Monroe wedding live now." The air around me seemed to still. I stared at the words, heart pounding so hard I could hear it. The gentle sway of the yacht, the murmur of waves, everything fell away. Daniel returned, saw my face, and stopped mid-step. "Rachel." I didn't look up. "It's live." He walked closer, voice soft. "You don't have to watch. I know." My fingers brushed the edge of the phone. But it's strange, isn't it, the whole world watching what I was never allowed to be part of. He didn't answer. He just stood there, the sound of the ocean filling the silence between us. The candle flickered. The scent of salt and citrus hung in the air. Finally, I set the phone back down untouched. "Maybe it's better this way," I said quietly. Daniel reached out and covered my hand with his. "Peace isn't about what you miss. It's about what you refuse to carry." The horizon had darkened now, the first stars trembling above the sea. I turned my face toward the wind and let it cool my skin. Somewhere far away, music was playing, vows were being spoken, champagne was spilling into crystal glasses. But here on this quiet deck, surrounded by nothing but sky and water, the only sound was the heartbeat of the waves. I didn't know yet that everything was about to change. For now, I let the sea hold my silence, and for the first time, I didn't feel small inside it. I felt infinite. The night was warm and still when I woke to the faint hum of the generator. The cabin glowed dimly in amber light, and Daniel's steady breathing filled the space beside me. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then the waves reminded me, soft and slow against the hull. I glanced at the clock. 6:14 a.m. Somewhere hundreds of miles north, my sister's wedding would begin in less than 2 hours. I sat up the sheet, falling to my waist. My phone lay on the nightstand, face down the way I'd left it. I told myself not to look. I'd made that promise to Daniel and to myself, no news, no curiosity. But promises made to quiet pain are the easiest ones to break. I reached for it, the glass cool against my palm, and unlocked the screen. The first thing I saw was a notification. Monroe wedding livestream now playing. For a long moment I stared at it. I could have swiped it away, could have thrown the phone into the sea. Instead, I tapped. The video loaded quickly, filling the screen with color and music. I recognized the venue instantly, white canopies, chandeliers, hanging from a tent sealing the beach just beyond. The camera panned over rows of seated guests. Everything shimmered in soft gold light. Then it stopped on her. Claire. My sister stood at the altar in a gown that glowed like ivory, flame veil pinned perfectly in place. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Behind her, our mother's face gleamed with pride, the kind that looks more like possession. I felt my pulse quicken, not from jealousy, but from something sharper, disbelief that I had once belonged in that picture. The camera shifted, catching the groom, Trevor, tall, polished expression unreadable. The music swelled. They were supposed to exchange vows. But his hands were at his sides, fists tight. Claire turned toward him, lips moving, though the mic didn't catch the words. Then he shook his head once sharply and stepped back. Someone gasped behind the camera. The guests began whispering. "What is he doing?" a woman's voice said off-screen. Trevor turned to the officiant, muttered something, and then without warning walked away. Down the aisle, past the cameras, past my mother, who rose half out of her chair, calling after him. The sound was chaos, chairs scraping, people standing, phones snapping up to record. The bride stood frozen, mouth open, eyes wide. I pressed pause. The image froze with Claire's face caught between disbelief and rage. My heart was hammering. The air around me felt thin. Daniel stirred behind me. Rach, I turned slowly. He was sitting up, hair rumpled, eyes squinting at the light. "What happened?" he asked. I handed him the phone. "See for yourself." He watched for less than 30 seconds before exhaling through his nose. "Wow, yeah." He handed it back. "You okay?" I wasn't sure how to answer. "I don't know what I am." I hit play again. The video continued, shakier now, the person filming trying to follow the commotion. The camera caught Claire spinning around, shouting at someone off-screen. The microphone picked up fragments. "He's overreacting, someone fix this. Where is Mom?" before cutting out in static. Then faintly, another voice, an older woman's voice, clear and scolding. "This is what happens when you erase people who love you, Claire." I knew that voice. Grandma June. The video stopped abruptly after that. I stared at the blank screen, my reflection ghosted across it. Daniel's voice was gentle. "That was her, wasn't it?" "Yes." "Guess the truth showed up to the wedding after all." I let out a short, breathless laugh. Karma RSVP'd. He smiled faintly. And she never misses a party. We sat there in silence for a while, the faint hum of the yacht filling the space where my thoughts should have been. I replayed the scene in my head again and again, the panic, the whispers, my grandmother's voice cutting through like thunder. When I finally looked up, Daniel was watching me. "What are you thinking, that I didn't have to lift a finger?" I said. "It all just unraveled." He nodded. "Sometimes the universe doesn't need help." By mid-morning, the video was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Different angles, guests filming the chaos, captions exploding with commentary. Runaway groom. Bride meltdown. The Monroe family curse. Luis, the chef, came up from the galley holding his phone like it might bite him. "Miss Rachel," he said cautiously, "I think your family's on the internet." Daniel gave him a look that made him retreat immediately. But I already knew. My notifications were a wildfire, texts, mentions, tags from strangers. I scrolled through the chaos, each clip worse than the last. One caught my grandmother's voice again, louder this time. "You cut out your own blood for vanity." The comments below were merciless, so the bride erased her sister. No wonder karma showed up in heels. My chest rose and fell slowly. There was no satisfaction, not yet. Just a strange calm, like the world was finally saying something I'd been screaming quietly for years. Daniel poured 2 glasses of water and handed me one. "Don't drown in it," he said. "I won't." "You're sure?" I looked up at him, steady. "For once I don't have to explain my side. The truth's already doing it for me." We spent the afternoon on the upper deck. The sea was calm, the color of melted sapphire. Every so often a notification buzzed, and I'd silence it again. Luis served lunch, grilled shrimp, citrus salad, but my appetite was gone. I couldn't stop thinking about that last moment of the video, the way my grandmother's voice had cracked when she said "love you." "Do you think she planned it?" I asked. Daniel shook his head. "No, I think she just stopped pretending too." He was right. We all had. By early evening the sun was low and warm. The world was still talking, but the ocean didn't care. Its rhythm stayed the same, steady, patient, certain. Daniel sat beside me with his laptop open, scanning headlines. "You've seen this one," he turned the screen toward me. "The Forgotten Sister, How Silence Exposed a Family's Secrets." I stared at it, then looked away. "They make it sound poetic." "Maybe it is," he said quietly. "Poetry's just truth written slow." I tilted my head toward the horizon, and sometimes it rhymes with karma. That made him laugh. The laughter faded into quiet. The sound of water filled the spaces between words. I leaned back, closing my eyes. The sea breeze brushed against my face, cool and forgiving. For once, there was nothing to fix, nothing to explain. Only a strange peace I hadn't felt in years, a peace born from the ruins of someone else's illusion. When I opened my eyes again, the sky had turned violet, and the first star blinked above us. Daniel was watching me, one hand resting lightly over mine. "You're not smiling," he said. "I'm thinking. About them. About me." He nodded slowly. And I think I finally understand something." "What's that?" "That I was never the problem," I said softly. "I was just the proof they didn't want to keep around." Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. The truth hung between us, quiet but solid. Below deck, my phone vibrated again, muffled through the wooden table. I didn't move to get it. I didn't need to know what new chaos waited. The ocean swayed gently beneath the yacht, rocking us in its endless rhythm. I breathed in the salt air, tasted freedom at the back of my throat, and thought finally, that silence had never sounded so good. When Daniel reached for my hand, I let him hold it, fingers lacing easily through his. The last glow of sunset slipped below the horizon, and the stars gathered like witnesses. Somewhere far away, my family was falling apart, the world watching. But here, surrounded by nothing but sea and sky, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not triumph, not revenge, just release. The waves kept their rhythm slow and sure, as if whispering a promise I finally believed. Everything that needed to break had broken. Everything that needed to surface had surfaced. And I was still here, quiet, breathing free. By sunrise, the world already knew. The internet had done what it does best: turn a private disaster into a public spectacle. When I walked out onto the deck that morning, Daniel was standing barefoot by the railing, his coffee forgotten in one hand, his phone glowing in the other. He didn't look up when I approached. "It's everywhere," he said quietly. I reached for the phone. The first thing I saw was the headline splashed across a trending page: "Runaway groom in Palm Beach bride melts down mid-ceremony." The thumbnail was Claire's face frozen mid-cry, mascara streaking like war paint. I scrolled. Dozens of videos, thousands of comments. Edits with dramatic music, slow-motion replays of Trevor walking away, reaction videos dissecting her every expression. Someone had even looped Grandma June's voice from the live stream. This is what happens when you erase people who love you, turning it into a viral audio clip. Daniel set his mug down and rubbed his eyes. "They're calling her the Monroe meltdown. It's trending on TikTok." I blinked at the screen. Of course it is. The yacht rocked gently beneath us, steady and unbothered by the chaos spreading across every feed. I looked at the sky, endless blue, clean, untainted. It felt like a different planet entirely. Luis appeared from below deck with breakfast, oblivious to the storm online. "Eggs and fruit, Miss Rachel." "Thanks, Luis," Daniel said quickly, taking the tray from him before I could answer. I sat down slowly, phone still in my hand. I knew I should put it away, but part of me couldn't stop watching. Every clip, every angle, every caption was another thread unraveling. Daniel joined me, his tone careful. "You don't need to see this. I know." I took a sip of juice, eyes still on the screen. "But I think I need to know." The next video autoplayed, a shaky recording from a guest near the altar. Trevor's voice faint but clear: "I'd rather leave now than lie forever." Then the camera swung wildly as he walked away, guests gasping, whispers rising. Someone yelled, "Is he serious?" Then came the image I'd seen before. Claire frozen in shock, our mother trying to calm her, Grandma June standing, her voice cutting through the noise like lightning. It ended abruptly. Daniel's hand brushed mine. "You okay?" I looked out at the horizon. The waves sparkled as if nothing extraordinary had happened anywhere. "I think so," I said slowly. "It's just strange. My whole life I thought I'd have to make them see who they really were. Turns out they did it themselves." He nodded, quiet understanding in his eyes. "That's how truth works. It doesn't need an audience, it just needs time." I smiled faintly, "And Wi-Fi apparently." That made him laugh. "Guess karma's got good connection." We ate in silence for a while, the ocean moving softly around us. But the peace didn't last long. My phone buzzed again, dozens of new notifications. I turned it face up and saw it: screenshots of text messages, snippets of the ceremony, tweets with millions of views. Then came the one that made me still. It was a comment pinned to one of the top videos. "Rumor has it, the sister they didn't invite is watching this from a yacht somewhere. I hope she's smiling." Daniel noticed the shift in my face. "What is it?" I handed him the phone. He read the comment and let out a low whistle. "The internet really doesn't miss a thing." "I didn't post anything," I said quickly. "I didn't even—" He raised a hand, cutting me off gently. "No one said you did. But somehow they already know your story." The idea felt surreal. I'd spent my whole life unseen in that family, overlooked, quiet, useful. And now strangers on the internet were painting me as a symbol of justice. I looked out at the sea again, letting the salt winds sting my face. "I didn't want revenge," I said softly. "I just wanted to stop hurting." Daniel reached for my hand, his voice calm. "Sometimes those are the same thing." We spent the rest of the morning on the upper deck, scrolling in stunned silence. Every new clip showed another piece of the truth I'd always known but never spoken. Claire shouting at our mother. My aunt crying. My father's old business partner storming out of the reception. Each angle was a confession broadcast to millions. And then another video appeared, different tone, different perspective. A woman sitting in what looked like a dressing room surrounded by gowns. Her voice was soft, measured. "I just styled a wedding where the groom walked out," she began. He said, and I quote, "I'd rather leave now than lie forever." Daniel leaned closer. "Who's that Olivia Rhodes?" I said, reading the username. "She's an influencer. My sister used to tag her all the time." Olivia continued almost sympathetically, "But that's not the wild part. The wild part was when the bride's own grandmother shouted that this was karma for erasing her blood." The whole room went silent. You could feel it. It wasn't just a wedding falling apart, it was a truth finally catching up. The video cut to clips of the chaos overlaid with captions like, "Don't build your happiness on someone else's silence." I felt something inside me shift. A release maybe. Not joy, not triumph, just weight leaving. Daniel set his phone down. "She just told the world your story." "It's not my story anymore," I said. "It's just the truth. And they finally can't control it." For the first time, I noticed how light the air felt, how easy it was to breathe. By noon, news outlets had picked it up. Entertainment blogs, morning talk shows, even the local papers. Each headline twisted the event slightly, but one thing stayed consistent. The Monroe family's downfall was public, and I was no longer invisible. I didn't share a single post. I didn't comment, didn't explain, didn't correct. The silence felt powerful, deliberate. Later, Daniel handed me his sunglasses and nodded toward the water. "Let's go down to the beach. You've watched enough screens for one lifetime." I hesitated, then left the phone on the table face down. The yacht lowered its small boat, and we drifted toward a crescent of white sand. The ocean was warm, the kind of blue that erased everything else. As we walked along the shoreline, I could still hear fragments of Grandma June's voice echoing in my head. "You cut out your own blood for vanity." It wasn't anger in her tone, it was heartbreak. Daniel kicked at the sand, his voice low. "You think she knew about the will?" I glanced at him, startled. "What?" He shrugged. The way she said it, it sounded like more than just emotion, like she knew something deeper. I frowned, watching the water ripple. Maybe. Or maybe she was just tired of pretending too. He nodded, and we kept walking, the waves curling around our feet. When we got back to the yacht, Luis was waiting with towels and cold lemonade. "Rough day online?" he asked with a smile too careful. I managed to laugh. You could say that. That evening after dinner, I sat alone on the upper deck while the others cleaned up. The sky was a soft gray, the first stars emerging. I powered on my phone again, out of habit more than curiosity. The screen lit up with messages, some from strangers, some from old coworkers, a few from relatives. Words like "proud of you," "you deserve peace." We always knew something was off, but one text stood out among the rest. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "You don't have to respond. Just know you were right all along." No name, no context, but I didn't need one. I smiled, then powered the phone off again. Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. "You good?" "I'm better," I said. He looked out at the dark horizon. Funny, isn't it? They built their world to impress everyone, and it all came undone on camera. I leaned against him, my voice soft. Maybe the truth just wanted its turn to speak. The sea glimmered under the last threads of light, endless and forgiving. I closed my eyes, listening to the water's rhythm, steady and certain, like it had been waiting all along. For the first time, I didn't feel erased. I felt rewritten. And that, I realized, was enough. The storm had passed during the night, but the air still carried its scent, salt rain, something wild left behind. When I stepped onto the deck that morning, the world looked newly washed. The sea glimmered in endless shades of blue, the sky wide and forgiving. Daniel was leaning against the railing, reading messages on his tablet. The expression on his face told me before he said a word. "They're not stopping," he murmured. I joined him, the boards cool under my bare feet. "Who everyone," he said. "The media, the guests, even your relatives. The fallout hasn't slowed down. There's a new video every hour." I sighed, resting my elbows on the railing. The water below was calm, almost indifferent. Let them. I'm done watching. Daniel looked at me for a moment before setting the tablet aside. I believe you, he said, but I don't think they're done watching you. His words sank slowly. I'd left that family years ago in every way that mattered, but somehow the world had decided my silence was the story now. My piece had gone viral. After breakfast, I went to my cabin and powered on my phone. Hundreds of new notifications blinked to life. Articles, podcast clips, even memes my face pulled from an old LinkedIn photo pasted beside headlines like "The Sister Who Stayed Silent." Some called me graceful, others accused me of orchestrating the scandal. It didn't matter which version they believed. Both were strangers wearing my name. Scrolling further, I found one headline that froze me. Grandmother confirms hidden Will Monroe family legacy in question. I clicked before I could think. The article quoted June, my grandmother, speaking to a local reporter. She had confirmed that my father's real will had been replaced after his death. She mentioned an attorney's name I recognized from childhood, Ava Lewis. The words blurred for a moment. I read them again, slower this time. My pulse steadied instead of racing. Finally, something real, something solid. Daniel appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" she told them, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandma told the press about the will. His brows lifted slightly. "So it's true." I nodded. "It's always been true." He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the table, studying my face. "You could fight this, you know. Legally. The evidence is out there now." I stared down at the phone, my reflection warped in the glass. Maybe I could. But what would winning even look like? Taking back what they already poisoned? Daniel didn't answer right away. "Maybe winning just means they don't get to define you anymore." The words landed softly but deep. I turned the phone off and placed it on the table as if it were a stone I no longer needed to carry. That afternoon, we anchored near a small island west of St. Lucia. The beach was untouched. White sand palms bent in a gentle bow. I waded into the shallows, the water warm and clear around my ankles. Daniel followed, tossing his shirt onto the sand. "You know," he said, "I've worked with people who'd give anything to make headlines like this." I laughed. "Then they can have them." He smiled, wading closer until the water reached his waist. "I like this version of you," he said. "What version is that?" "The one who doesn't owe anyone an explanation." I tilted my head. "I'm still learning her." "Good," he said. "Keep her." We swam for a while, letting the current pull and release us in lazy rhythm. The sun burned high, and the ocean sparkled so fiercely it almost hurt to look at. When I finally swam back to shore, I felt lighter, almost hollowed out in the best way. We spread towels on the sand and lay side by side, watching the clouds drift like soft ships. Daniel reached for my hand without looking. The silence between us felt full, comfortable. After a long while, I said quietly, "I think Grandma's trying to make things right. In her own way." "She's brave," Daniel said. "It's not easy to go against blood." "Maybe," I murmured. "Or maybe she's just tired of pretending like me." He turned his head to look at me. "You two are more alike than you think." The thought made me smile. Maybe he was right. Later that evening, as we sailed again, the sky melted into gold. I poured wine while Daniel adjusted the sails. The wind was soft, playful, tugging at my hair. "You know," he said over the sound of the water, "when you first told me about your family, I thought you were exaggerating. And now I think you were merciful." I laughed quietly. "You're not wrong," he smiled, setting the rope down. "You're sure you don't want to call your grandmother? She's probably worried." I hesitated, then shook my head. "If I call now, it'll make it look like I'm reacting to the chaos. I want to reach out when it's quiet again, when the truth isn't still being chewed apart." "That makes sense," he said. "You've earned the right to choose your moment." As the sun sank, we moved to the bow, sitting close. The sky turned deep orange, then violet. I could still feel the warmth of the day on my skin. "I keep thinking about what you said earlier," I told him. "About not letting them define me. I think I've been doing that all my life, living as a reaction to someone else's version of me." He glanced sideways. So what's your version? I thought for a long time. Someone who doesn't need to be the hero or the victim, I said finally. Just human. He nodded. That's a good start. Night fell slowly. The crew disappeared below deck, and the world became nothing but stars and water. We sat there until the constellations sharpened above us, the yacht gliding quietly through the dark. At some point, Daniel went inside to get blankets. When he returned, I was staring at my phone, which I had powered back on for the first time in hours. A single text message blinked at the top of the screen. From Grandma June. Don't be afraid of what's yours, sweetheart. It's time. The words were simple, but they made my heart ache in the best way. I typed a reply, I'm not afraid anymore. Then I deleted it. She didn't need proof. She already knew. When Daniel sat beside me again, I handed him the phone and pointed at the message. He read it and smiled softly. She's giving you permission to take back your life. I looked out at the dark water. Maybe she's just reminding me it was always mine. We sat in silence again, wrapped in the blanket, listening to the waves. Somewhere far away, reporters were still shouting questions. Strangers were still watching clips. My family was still spinning stories. But none of that reached us here. Under the stars, everything was quiet, everything honest. Daniel turned toward me, his voice a low murmur. You know, I think the universe is a little poetic. They erased you from a guest list, and now the world can't stop saying your name. I smiled, leaning my head on his shoulder. Maybe that's how balance works. He kissed the top of my head. Maybe that's justice. The night wind brushed against us, warm and forgiving. The yacht cut through the water like a whisper, and I closed my eyes, breathing in the salt and peace. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a missing piece of anyone's story. I was my own. The sea was quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that comes only after something has been broken and rearranged. I woke to sunlight spilling through the cabin windows, golden and calm, as if the world had decided to start over. Daniel was already on deck, talking softly with Captain Marco. I heard fragments of their voices drifting in through the open door. Coordinates whined something about docking later that evening near St. Vincent. When I stepped outside, Daniel handed me a mug of coffee. You slept through everything, he said with a smile. Even the dolphins that followed us at dawn. Maybe they knew I needed the rest, I said, taking a sip. The air was warm and clean, the ocean so still it looked painted. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. Daniel glanced at me. There's something for you, he said, nodding toward the table. A white envelope lay there, slightly damp at the edges, my name written across it in a familiar slanted hand. I froze. Where did that come from? Delivered by courier at the last port, he said. Marco said it came through your family's attorney. I stared at the handwriting. It was elegant, deliberate, the kind of script I'd seen on birthday cards when I was a child. My grandmother's. I sat down slowly, tracing my finger over the letters. She hasn't written to me in years. Maybe now she's ready to, Daniel said quietly. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope. The paper inside was cream-colored, heavy, folded twice. The scent of lavender lingered faintly on it. My dear Rachel, the letter began. I should have told you this long ago, but I let fear keep me silent. Before your father passed, he made changes to his will. He wanted you to inherit his shares of Monroe Holdings and the Monterey House. He said you were the one who understood what he built, the only one who saw the value beyond the numbers. Your mother convinced everyone that the older version was final. I stayed quiet because I thought I was protecting the family. I see now I was protecting a lie. Ava Lewis still has the true document. It's time you know the truth. I stopped reading for a moment, my breath caught halfway in my chest. The sea blurred in front of me. You were never erased, Rachel, it continued. You were hidden because you were the only one who could see clearly. Please forgive my silence. I will do what I can to set things right. The signature was shaky but sure, Love, June. I folded the letter carefully, though my hands shook. For a long time I couldn't speak. Daniel sat beside me without saying a word. When I finally looked up, my throat felt tight. They didn't exclude me from the wedding to keep the peace, I said softly. They did it because of this. Daniel nodded slowly. They were protecting their secret. The words hit like cold water. I had always suspected something beneath the surface, a shadow moving just out of reach. Now it had a name. I leaned back, staring out at the horizon. All those years of being told to understand, to stay quiet, to forgive. It wasn't about peace. It was control. He didn't interrupt. He just watched me the way he always did, steady, patient, letting me find my own words. I thought I was the strong one because I didn't fight back, I said, but I was just keeping their story alive. Then maybe now you write your own, Daniel said. The wind picked up just enough to stir the edges of the letter in my hand. I folded it again and placed it on the table as if anchoring something fragile to the world. By afternoon, the yacht drifted closer to shore. St. Vincent glowed in the distance, lush and green. We could see villas scattered along the cliffs, bright white against the jungle. The air smelled faintly of hibiscus and salt. A notification buzzed on my phone. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello, Rachel. The voice was calm, professional. This is Ava Lewis. I'm an attorney in Los Angeles. Your grandmother asked me to reach out. My heart skipped. I just read her letter. I'm glad, she said. I've held the original will for years, notarized and witnessed. I never destroyed it, though I was pressured to. June has authorized me to reinstate it. We'll be filing in Sacramento Superior Court. I gripped the edge of the table. My mother knew she was there when it was signed, Ava said. She chose to ignore it. I believe she hoped you never would. I went silent, the sound of waves filling the space between us. Ava's tone softened. You don't have to do anything yet. I just wanted you to know the truth is secure. What happens next is up to you. I thanked her quietly and hung up. Daniel was watching me. Well, she's filing the case. It's official. He poured me a glass of water and slid it across the table. And how do you feel? I stared at the horizon for a long time before answering. Lighter, but also sad. Because of them, because it didn't have to be this way. He nodded. Truth has a price, but it also pays something back. I smiled faintly. What does it pay? Freedom, he said simply. The rest of the afternoon passed in quiet. The sun was high, the water smooth. I sat on the bow with my notebook, writing small fragments that didn't need to be perfect, just honest. They taught me silence as survival. But silence isn't peace, it's debt. I owe them nothing now. Later, when the sun dipped low, we opened a bottle of wine and sat together watching the sky shift from gold to violet. The sea mirrored every color like glass. I don't think I'll ever see them the same way again, I said quietly. Good, Daniel said. You're not supposed to. I don't even want revenge anymore, I admitted. I just want to live without pretending. He raised his glass. Then to truth. However late it arrives, we clinked our glasses lightly. The sound was soft, almost fragile, but it felt like a beginning. After dinner, I took Grandma June's letter back to my cabin. I read it again slowly, tracing the ink as if it could speak. When I finished, I placed it inside my journal between 2 blank pages. A space for what came next. Outside, the sea was dark and vast, the stars scattered like salt. I stood at the railing, wind lifting my hair, and whispered to no one. You were right, Grandma. Time does bring everything back. Daniel came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. You okay? I'm more than okay, I said, looking out at the horizon. I'm awake. He kissed my temple and rested his chin on my shoulder. Then let's stay that way. The yacht rocked gently, the ocean humming like it knew the secret too. I watched the first light of the moon shimmer on the waves and thought how strange it was, how sometimes justice doesn't arrive in anger or chaos but in stillness. And in that stillness I finally felt whole. The morning after the letter felt different. The air had shifted lighter somehow, though nothing around me had changed. The same soft waves brushed the hull, the same horizon stretched ahead. Yet inside me, Something that had been clenched for years had finally loosened. I made coffee and carried it up to the deck, the cup warm between my hands. Daniel was already there, sitting with his legs stretched out, eyes half closed against the sunlight. He smiled when he saw me. "You look rested." "I feel emptied," I said, settling beside him, "but in a good way." He handed me a folded newspaper printed in glossy island stock. "They're still talking about it," he said. The headline read, "Inheritance Scandal Shakes the Monroe Legacy." Below it, a picture of my mother outside her house, shielding her face from cameras. I stared at the photo for a long time. "It's strange," I murmured. "For so long they acted like I didn't exist. Now the whole world can't stop saying my name." Daniel's voice was quiet. The truth finally found its microphone. I took a sip of coffee, the taste grounding me. "I don't even feel angry anymore," I said after a moment. "Just tired of how much space they've taken up in my head." "Then stop renting it to them," he said simply. I laughed softly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said, "but it's necessary." We spent the rest of the morning sailing north, the yacht gliding through calm water that shimmered like liquid glass. I sat by the bow with my notebook, flipping through old pages filled with fragments of pain and clarity. On one page I had written weeks ago, "If I leave, they'll erase me." Now I crossed it out and wrote beneath it, "If I stay erased, they win." Around noon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. For a moment I thought of ignoring it, but curiosity, quiet and unthreatening, made me answer. Rachel Monroe, a calm female voice said, "Yes, this is Ava Lewis. I wanted to let you know the hearing for your father's will has been set. 3 weeks from now, Sacramento Superior Court." My breath caught for a second. "That soon, yes. Your grandmother insisted we move quickly. She's prepared to testify if necessary." I closed my eyes, picturing June, small, proud, steady as a mountain. "She shouldn't have to do that at her age." "She told me she owes you that much," Ava said softly. Something twisted in my chest. "What happens now?" "I'll send the documents for your signature. Once the hearing begins, the court will review both wills. If the evidence holds, and I believe it will, you'll be recognized as the rightful heir." Meaning Monroe Holdings and the Monterey property will pass to you," Ava said. Retroactively. The silence between us stretched long and thin. I had imagined this moment before winning vindicated, but now that it was here, there was no victory in it. Just a kind of quiet clarity. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I just want the truth to stand." Ava's voice softened. "Sometimes that's the strongest form of revenge there is." When I hung up, Daniel was watching me. "So it's official," I said. "There's a court date." He nodded slowly. "How do you feel?" I stared at the horizon where sky and water melted together. "Free," I said. "But also sad. I shouldn't have to prove I belong." He reached for my hand. "You don't. The law is just catching up." We sat in silence for a while, letting the wind fill the spaces words couldn't. I thought about the years I had spent defending myself in small, invisible ways, working harder, staying quiet, making peace for everyone but me. I had spent decades trying to be the kind of daughter who wouldn't be erased, and now, by doing nothing, I had become visible again. Later that afternoon, we anchored near a cove off Martinique. The cliffs rose high above the water, covered in green, so lush it almost glowed. Daniel went for a swim while I stayed on deck, flipping open my notebook again. I wrote a single sentence across a blank page. "I forgive you, but I won't return." The words came easily, like they'd been waiting for a place to land. When Daniel climbed back aboard, droplets sparkling on his skin, he said, "You look lighter." "I think I just told them goodbye," I said. He tilted his head. "In your head, in writing, that's enough." He smiled. Closure doesn't need witnesses. That evening, as the sun set, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "You'll ruin this family if you go through with it." No name, but I didn't need one. The tone was familiar. My mother. I didn't reply. I didn't even save the number. I turned off the phone and placed it face down on the table. Daniel saw it and asked quietly, Her, I said. And nothing. Silence can be an answer too. We ate dinner under the stars, grilled fish, roasted vegetables, a bottle of wine we'd been saving. The sea was calm again, moonlight gliding over the water like silk. I felt my pulse slow, steady, aligned with the rhythm of the waves. After dinner, Daniel brought out 2 small candles and set them on the table. You ever think about what you'll say in court? I don't think I need to say much, I said. The truth speaks for itself, he nodded. But still you should think about what matters most to you. What's worth fighting for? I thought for a moment. Not money, not property, just the right to stop explaining myself. He raised his glass. Then, here's to that. We toasted and the moment felt still and full. Later that night I couldn't sleep. I went to the railing and looked out at the sea. The moon was full, its reflection stretching in a perfect path across the water. I thought of my father, his quiet patience, his worn hands, the way he'd always said, "Time is the only witness that never lies." He was right. The next morning I woke early and wrote him a letter. Not to send, just to write. You trusted me with your legacy, and I didn't even know it. I wish I could tell you I'm angry, but I'm not. I'm just grateful you saw me. I'll protect what's ours not for pride, but because truth deserves a keeper. I folded the letter, carried it up to the deck, and stood by the railing. The water below shimmered silver and blue. I let the paper fall, watching it drift and dissolve into the sea. Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Letting go. Finishing the sentence, I said. He pressed a kiss to my shoulder. You think they'll ever apologize? No, I said. And that's okay. I don't need them to. We stood there a long time, the wind soft against our faces, the world beautifully indifferent. Somewhere far away, my family was scrambling to rewrite a story that had already ended. And here, surrounded by nothing but water and sky, I realized I didn't need to be part of their ending. I already had my beginning. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the world had caught up again. The calm of the sea couldn't protect me from what waited on land. Daniel was sitting at the table when I came out onto the deck, his tablet glowing faintly in the early light. He didn't look up when he spoke. You've gone viral again. I sighed, taking a seat across from him. For what this time? Breathing, he slid the tablet toward me. On the screen, a news headline read, "The Silent Sister Speaks Through Silence." Below it, a still frame from my Instagram post, the one I'd made days ago of the sea, captioned, "Sometimes silence is the loudest answer." It had over 3 million likes. I blinked at the number, then laughed softly. The internet's applauding me for saying nothing. Maybe they're just relieved someone finally did, Daniel said. I took a sip of the coffee he'd poured for me. It was strong and a little bitter grounding. I didn't post that for anyone. It was just a thought. Thoughts travel fast when the world's looking for meaning, he said, leaning back. You've become a symbol now. People are using your post in videos about toxic families and boundaries. There's even a hashtag number, "Silence is Power." I looked out over the water, the horizon glowing pink and gold. It's strange, isn't it? I used to beg them to listen. Now everyone's listening and I have nothing left to say. Daniel smiled faintly. That's the irony of peace. It doesn't need to explain itself. We spent the rest of the morning in quiet, watching gulls circle over the water. But even in stillness, I could feel the hum of the world vibrating somewhere beyond us. People dissecting, reposting, arguing over a life they didn't live. Just before noon, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't news alerts, it was a link from a number I didn't recognize. I clicked it before I could think. The video opened to Claire. She was sitting in what looked like a living room. Bright light, staged flowers, a soft piano track playing in the background. Her hair was done, her makeup understated. The title beneath the video read, "My Side of the Story." I didn't want to watch, but I did. She began with a trembling voice. I know people have said a lot about me, and I can't control the narrative anymore. But I want everyone to know I never meant to hurt anyone. Family is complicated. We all make mistakes. I paused it halfway through. I'd heard this tone my whole life rehearsed. Remorse the kind meant to smooth over cracks without sealing them. Daniel appeared behind me, reading over my shoulder. "Is that her?" "Yes," I said. "And she's still performing." He frowned. "Do you want me to turn it off?" "No," I said, pressing play again. Claire continued, eyes glistening just enough for the camera. I wish my sister understood how much pressure I was under, how much I wanted her to be part of it, but she hesitated. Things were complicated. She took a breath, lowering her voice. "I hope one day she forgives me. I love her, always have." The video ended there, fading to black with a soft piano note. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Daniel broke the silence first. "You know what, that was right, a PR move," I said flatly. He nodded. "She's trying to control the damage." "I know," I said, "but it's not mine to fix anymore." I locked the phone and set it face down on the table. Let her chase peace like a brand. I'll keep the real thing. Daniel smiled. "That's the quote that'll trend next." I laughed, a small, tired sound. God help them if it does. Later that afternoon, we anchored near a coral reef. The water was so clear you could see the seabed stretching out in shades of green and gold. We swam for hours, floating between silence and sunlight. Each time I surfaced, the world felt farther away. When we climbed back aboard, Luis brought towels and fruit. "You should check your phone," he said with a small grin. "You're on the news again." I groaned. "That's not as flattering as you think." But curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone on, and within seconds it buzzed non-stop mentions, tags, messages. The video of Claire's apology was everywhere, but so was my old post. Someone had stitched them together, her tearful confession followed by my still image of the sea. The caption read, "She stayed silent." And that said everything. Daniel watched over my shoulder and shook his head. "Poetic editing. Unintentional poetry," I corrected. "I didn't plan any of this." He leaned closer, his tone soft. "That's why it matters. You didn't plan it. You just told the truth by living it." I set the phone aside again. Maybe the world's hungry for stories that don't scream. By evening, the sun had turned the sky bronze. We sat on the deck with wine, watching the horizon fade. The air smelled like salt and mango, and the ocean was as calm as glass. Daniel poured me another glass and raised his own. "To quiet revolutions," he said. I clinked mine against his. "To finally being heard without shouting." We drank, and the moment stretched, soft, slow, infinite. I could feel the weight of everything lifting piece by piece until only stillness remained. Later, when the stars appeared, I opened my phone one last time. The top notification was from a journalist. "CNN Culture would love to feature you in a piece about digital healing and silence. No pressure." I smiled and turned the screen off. "No pressure," I whispered. Daniel glanced at me. "What's that? An invitation I don't need to accept," I said. "Not yet." He nodded. "Good. You don't owe them your voice just because they finally want to hear it." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the hum of the waves and the faint music from below deck. Somewhere the internet was dissecting my piece, turning it into content. But here, surrounded by nothing but water and sky, I was untouchable. When the breeze picked up, I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. Daniel reached for my hand, his thumb brushing against mine. "You know they built their empire on noise," he said. "You built yours on quiet." I smiled, eyes still closed. "Then I hope it lasts longer." "It will," he said. "The truth usually does." The stars deepened above us, reflecting on the water like scattered glass. The world could twist the story however it wanted. It could call me cold, or wise, or lucky. None of it mattered. Because for once I wasn't watching it happen, I was living beyond it. I leaned back against Daniel's shoulder, the sound of the sea steady and endless around us. For years I had mistaken silence for punishment. Now I understood it was freedom. I wasn't erased. I was rewritten. And the tide, patient as time itself, carried me forward. The air over the Bahamian Cove was so still that morning it felt like the world had stopped moving. Sunlight shimmered across the surface of the sea, scattering diamonds in every direction. I stood barefoot on the deck, a mug of coffee cooling in my hands, watching the slow dance of light and water. For the first time in years, I didn't wake with that familiar sense of urgency clawing at my chest. Daniel came up from below deck, hair still damp from a shower, his voice low and warm. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied, smiling faintly. "You know what's strange? I don't feel like checking the news." "Progress," he said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "You're officially recovering." Recovering from what? He looked at me for a moment. From being needed by the wrong people. I laughed quietly, but there was truth in it. For so long, I'd defined myself through what others required of me, my family, my work, my own guilt. Now, with nothing demanding my attention, I felt oddly weightless, like someone who'd been holding their breath for years without noticing. After breakfast, I opened my inbox for the first time in days. Hundreds of messages flooded the screen, requests for interviews, podcast invitations, partnership offers from brands I'd never heard of. But one caught my eye. TEDx Santa Barbara Reimagining Boundaries. The subject line was polite, the tone gentle. They wanted me to speak about silence, about healing from toxic families, about choosing peace. Daniel glanced up from his laptop when he saw my face. "Something interesting," I hesitated. "They want me to give a talk. About all this." He tilted his head. "Are you going to do it?" "I don't know," I said. "Part of me wants to disappear, not become a message." He smiled softly. "Maybe it's not about disappearing. Maybe it's about choosing how you show up." His words followed me for the rest of the morning. I sat on the deck with my notebook, the same one I'd been carrying since the first day we left port. Its pages were a patchwork of memories and notes, confessions written in stolen moments between storms. I turned to a blank page and wrote one sentence at the top. "Peace is not what's left when the noise ends. It's what begins when you stop contributing to it." The pen moved easily after that. I wrote about forgiveness, not the cinematic kind, but the quiet, unacknowledged forgiveness that doesn't require the other person to deserve it. I wrote about boundaries and how they aren't walls, but doors you learn to close gently. I wrote about my mother's voice, my sister's jealousy, my grandmother's courage. Every sentence was a thread I had been carrying inside me, and writing them down felt like untangling a knot I didn't realize had grown so tight. By afternoon, Daniel found me still sitting there, eyes red but calm. "How's the writing going?" he asked. "Better than therapy," I said with a small smile. "I think I'm finally telling the story the right way." He handed me a glass of iced tea and sat beside me. "You know what I love most about all this?" "What?" "You stopped apologizing for how you feel." I looked at him, sunlight flickering over his face. Maybe that's the only thing I ever needed to learn. We stayed like that for a while, listening to the slow rhythm of waves against the hull. The air smelled of salt and coconut oil, and somewhere distant I could hear the faint cry of gulls. Later that evening, I found myself thinking about my grandmother. Her letter had become my anchor, a reminder that even silence could be an act of love. I decided to write her one back, not to send, just to say what I never could aloud. "Dear Grandma, I think I understand you now. You didn't stay quiet because you were weak. You stayed quiet because you were tired of fighting people who confused love with ownership. I forgive you for that silence. You were trying to protect peace, and I'm finally learning how to do the same." I folded the page and tucked it between the others in my notebook. For the first time, I didn't need her to answer. As the sun sank, Daniel joined me on deck with 2 glasses of wine. "You've been busy," he said. "I wrote a letter I'll never send," I said. He smiled. "That's usually the right kind." The sky glowed pink and orange, the horizon melting into the sea. "You know," I said after a moment, "if I ever do that talk, I think I know what I'll call it." "Yeah, no is a full sentence." He chuckled softly. "That's perfect. I'd buy the book too." "Book?" I raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. "Give it a few months. You'll have too much to say for just one talk." I laughed, shaking my head. "Maybe, But for now, I just want to finish this chapter. Daniel raised his glass. To finishing the chapter, I touched mine against his, and to beginning the next one on purpose. That night, as the yacht drifted gently under a canopy of stars, I couldn't sleep. I walked barefoot to the railing, notebook in hand, and opened it to a new page. I wrote about the difference between quiet and peace, between being silent and being free. I wrote, I spent my life trying to be easy to love. Now, I just want to be true. The moonlight turned the page silver. I tore it out, folded it once, and tucked it into the back pocket of my journal. That one was for me, not the world. When I turned around, Daniel was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, smiling softly. "You're glowing," he said. "Moonlight," I replied. "No," he said. "Something else." He walked closer, placing his hands gently on my shoulders. "I hope you know you didn't just survive them, Rachel. You outgrew them." His words hit deeper than he realized. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "That's what healing feels like, isn't it? Not triumph, just space." "Exactly," he said. "Space for whatever comes next." We stood there for a long time, listening to the sea whisper against the yacht. Somewhere out there, the story of the Monroe family was still unraveling, articles, speculation, the endless echo of strangers' opinions. But for once, none of it mattered. Here, the only story that existed was the one I was finally writing for myself. Later, before bed, I sat at the small desk in our cabin and wrote a single sentence across the final page of the notebook. Maybe peace was always the point. When I closed it, the sound was soft, like the closing of a door that had been open too long. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt and new beginnings. Daniel's arm slid around my waist as I looked out the window, the sea glittering under the moon. "Everything feels different now," I said quietly. "That's because it is," he whispered back. "You stopped waiting for them to see you. You finally saw yourself." And in that moment, with the ocean stretching endlessly before us, I realized he was right. I wasn't lost anymore. I wasn't running or reacting. I was simply alive. 6 months later, the mornings in Austin felt different. The light came through my window softly, the kind that didn't demand anything of me. Outside, the trees around Lady Bird Lake shimmered with early spring green, and the air carried that faint sweetness that always came before the city woke. I poured coffee into my favorite chipped mug and leaned against the kitchen counter, watching sunlight move slowly across the floorboards. Daniel was in the living room, sketching near the window, his pencil tapping softly against the paper. "You're up early," he said, without looking up. "I couldn't sleep," I said, smiling faintly. "Too much peace, maybe," he laughed. "You say that like it's a bad thing. It's just new," I said. Life had become smaller but fuller. Our townhouse near the lake wasn't grand, but it was ours, sunlit, quiet, warm. I worked from a desk by the window, consulting part-time for a media agency I'd helped build years ago. On good days, I wrote essays, reflections, the beginnings of something I didn't yet call a book. My phone buzzed gently beside me. A reminder popped up: TEDx Santa Barbara, reimagining boundaries. I smiled at the words, not because of pride, but because of what they meant. That talk, recorded 2 months ago, had reached millions. The emails that followed were endless, women writing from all over the world, sharing how they'd finally walked away from the families that had dimmed their light. I replied to a few that first week, but after a while I realized I didn't need to answer all of them. Sometimes healing doesn't need more words, it just needs company. I closed my laptop and walked out to the balcony. The city was stretching awake, the air filled with birds and the sound of distant joggers along the lake path. I took a slow breath. No cameras, no judgment, just living. Daniel joined me a moment later, still holding his sketchbook. "You've been quiet this morning," he said. "I'm thinking about how easy everything feels," I said. "Like I've been carrying heavy bags for years and I finally put them down." He smiled. "And you didn't even realize how much they weighed." "Exactly." We sat side by side for a while, listening to the sound of wind brushing through the trees. After a long pause, I said, "Do you ever think about them?" He didn't ask who I meant. Sometimes, he said, but not in the same way you used to. I know, I said. It's strange. I don't hate them anymore. I just don't feel anything. That's not strange, he said. That's peace. A few days later, a package arrived from my publisher, a box filled with copies of my first book, deleted from the guest list. I opened it on the kitchen table, carefully lifting one from the stack. The cover was simple, a pale horizon fading into calm sea, the title in clean black print. I ran my fingers over the embossed letters. Daniel came up behind me. So this is it, he said softly. Your story in print. I smiled, small and full. It's not about them anymore. It's about what happens after. He placed a kiss on the top of my head. You built something beautiful out of everything they tried to take from you. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. That evening we walked along the lake, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and blooming flowers. The path curved past families, biking couples holding hands, runners lost in rhythm. For once I felt like just another person among them, not someone defined by loss or headlines or inheritance. Just a woman walking alive and free. When we reached the bridge, I leaned over the railing, watching my reflection ripple in the water. I barely recognized her anymore, the woman with steady eyes and soft shoulders. She wasn't carrying ghosts. She wasn't begging to be seen. She was simply there. Daniel leaned beside me. What are you thinking? That piece looks a lot like this, I said. Ordinary, quiet, unremarkable, and perfect, he added. Perfect, I agreed. A week later, we flew back to the Caribbean, not to escape this time, but to revisit the place where everything had changed. When we arrived, the sky was a deep blue dome and the ocean smelled exactly as it had that first morning, the scent of freedom still sharp and alive. We rented a small yacht for the weekend, nothing fancy, just enough to drift along the coastline. On the second day, as the sun lowered into a gold haze, I brought out my old notebook, the one that had followed me through every chapter. The pages were sun-bleached and fragile at the edges. I flipped to the first entry I'd written months ago. I just want it to stop hurting. I smiled at the sentence, then tore out the page. Daniel watched quietly as I held it over the water. You sure? He asked. I'm sure, I said. She's not me anymore. I let the page go. It drifted on the wind for a moment before touching the surface and dissolving into the sea. The sunlight caught the ripples where it vanished, and I felt something settle inside me, a full stop at the end of a sentence that had gone on too long. Daniel slid an arm around my waist. You didn't just survive it, Rachel, he said. You rewrote it. I looked out at the horizon, the light bending across the water. Maybe that's what healing really is, I said softly. Not erasing the past, but making sure it ends differently. We stayed on deck until the sun disappeared, the air cooling into night. The sea shimmered under the first stars, patient and endless. I felt the quiet reach all the way through me. Later, as we prepared to leave, I opened my notebook one last time. On the final page I wrote, They erased me once, but the truth remembered my name. I'm no longer waiting for a seat at their table. I built my own, and there's room for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. I closed the notebook, set it down beside me, and turned to Daniel. I think that's the last thing I needed to say, he smiled. Then it's time to live. The tide whispered against the hull as we stood there together, the stars multiplying above. The same ocean that once carried my pain, now carried my peace. I looked into the dark horizon and said quietly, almost to myself, If my story found you when you needed it, tell me yours. Tell me what you walked away from to find your calm. Daniel looked at me. That sounds like something you'd say on your next book tour. I shook my head, smiling. No, that's something I'd say to anyone who's ever felt invisible. The waves shimmered silver beneath the moonlight, and I thought about every person who might be listening. Every woman, every sister, every version of me that once thought leaving meant losing. Sometimes walking away isn't abandonment. It's arrival. If you're still here with me, take a deep breath. Maybe this story reminded you of something you've lived through or something you're still trying to let go of. Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear how your story found its peace too. And if this one stayed with you, stay a while longer. There are more stories waiting here, stories of justice, healing, and the quiet power of starting over. Because peace isn't the end of the story. It's where the real one begins.